All right. Dr. Hill, I want to start kind of talking about some of you and your personal life and some of the things that have brought you here to this moment. So I want to start kind of with your early life. Can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up? How did you grow up? And then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, far away from here, the Land of Enchantment. I was there because my mom moved there to be with her older brother. They're originally from Chicago area. And so she moved there and met my dad, and they had me. My mom had two older girls, and so we lived there together. I'm sure you've heard my story about the tragic death of my middle sister, Felicia. My older sister, Monique, was 8. My sister, Felicia, was 7. I was only 6 months old. They went swimming one day at an apartment complex. My parents were at work. They were with the babysitter, and my mom came home and didn't have a child, and so extremely tragic. My parents divorced shortly after that, but my grandparents came down from Albuquerque and were there to raise me. So growing up in the house was always me and my grandparents and my sister Monique and my mom. It's just extremely close. And fast forward till today, you know, my girls have grown up being with their grandparents, taking care of them. They didn't go to child care early on. My mom and stepdad took care of them, and we've just purchased a home in Mecklenburg County. We close on Monday. We're so excited, but my parents are moving in with us. So big family people, we believe in taking care of each other.
Oh, I love that so much. So if your family could describe you as a child growing up, like what attributes would they have given to you?
Probably a rule follower. Bossy. They always said I was going to be a teacher.
Beyonce said, "You are not bossy, you are the boss." Okay.
That's it then. I think they would say that I was really sweet and caring. Always wanted to make sure that everybody else was taken care of. Is there anything that you need? I think that's what they would say.
And so you're in Albuquerque through high school?
Yes.
Okay, through high school.
Yes.
And
then I was in a math and science program in high school, and had the opportunity to be mentored by some engineers who are graduates of the North Carolina A&T State University. They were in New Mexico because Sandia National Labs heavily recruits engineers, and the number one place they recruit engineers is A&T. So employees at the National Lab are doing a STEM program, a math and science technology program that I was in, and asked me, what are you doing for college? I'm not sure, but I know I'm going. And they said, have you ever heard of North Carolina A&T State University? It's a historically black college. And I was like, what is a historically black college? Never heard of that. But my mom said, let's go visit. We flew to Nashville, drove from Nashville to Greensboro, much longer than we thought. That was before Google Maps and all that stuff. And fell in love with it. Fell in love with the campus and just decided to move here. I took a leap of faith over 2,000 miles away all by myself.
Wow, okay, and so what did you think that you were going to be the typical when I grew up? What was like in your mindset of what you wanted to be?
Early on it was a nurse, but then at maybe 6th grade or so, it was definitely a teacher. So 6th grade on, it was definitely a teacher. And then I was in a program actually my senior year of high school where we had a lab school. So we had preschool kids that were at our high school, which was pretty cool. And so I taught at that lab school. And ironically enough, when I was in preschool, I attended that lab school. So it was just all full circle. Absolutely loved it. They actually did a news story with me, had a picture of me as a student at the lab school and then teaching at that lab school my senior year.
So it really came full circle for you.
Absolutely. And my grandfather that I mentioned earlier is an educator, lots of educators in my family, so teaching is just in our blood.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so you get to college. I don't feel like we talk enough about you going to an HBCU. Like, that's a big deal, right? Huge deal. And especially now knowing that, like, you weren't familiar with the HBCU culture and stuff like that prior. Mm-hmm. So when it came up, like, it was just another school at that point to you. Tell me about the experience when you got there.
Well, it was, before I got there, it was a really big deal because living in Albuquerque, less than 2% of the population in the entire state is African American. And so when I came to North Carolina, I was a little bit of culture shock, right? But then getting to A&T, just the wonderful family feel. My mom is really big on you meet the people that are in charge, and so she made me introduce myself to the dean and the chancellor and all of those things, and I had to go up and shake hands and say a very proper hello, and so she was really instrumental in making sure to teach me that you make those connections. But A&T just had a family feel right from the beginning. Had met friends right away that I'm still friends with today, and just absolutely loved being on A&T's campus.
And are you the same with your girls? Kind of some of the things that your mom taught you?
Oh,
yes.
yes,
Similarities
absolutely. Like, you're going into the grocery store and you're going to ask a question. Or when we go to the doctor, when the doctor asks how you're feeling, don't look at me, it's your body. You're responsible for communicating your needs to adults. So extremely important.
So you get there, what do you major in when you get to
Elementary education, Hodgen Hall.
Okay. All right, you got to tell me a good memory now. What's like a memory that we don't know about? Give us a A&T memory. What is it that you're thinking of? Like what you can think of when you think
So
of
I'll say two things. One on the professional side was my very first internship was tutoring at the YMCA, which was right up on the corner, the Hayes Memorial Y, and I was partnered with the Black Child Development Institute. And so just loved going there a couple of times a week, 2 or 3 times a week to tutor students, and just really couldn't wait till I got into the classroom to do that type of thing. On the social end, I would definitely say going to games every single Saturday, waking up. My dorm was right across the street from the football field, so walking over with my friends, having a great time. Halftime shows were the best.
Do you go back for homecomings?
I was going back on a regular basis until I started having children, and that was just too much work. So we went back for the first time last year, and they had a ball. They loved it.
And then you decided you were going to stay there and get your master's, right? Mm-hmm. What did you master in, and why the decision to stay where you were?
Mm-hmm. So I didn't go right away to get my master's. It was a couple of years in between, but I went back initially for adult education. In my role as an educator, there's been a few times that I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, K-12. And so when I went back to get my master's, it was during that time in my career that I was like, I'm not sure I want to stay with K-12 education. I may want to do corporate training, so I went back for adult ed. But then when I went back for adult ed, I was like, I don't want to do this. I really like working with K-12. So I switched over to instructional technology, which was a great blend between the two, because a lot of it was adult, how to work with adults, providing professional development, that type of thing, but also was still heavily focused on pedagogy and working with students.
So you do all these things right after your master's. Tell me, what was your career then? Where was your life at that point before you go get your doctorate?
Sure. So I was teaching, and actually when I was getting my master's, one of my professors asked me if I was interested in visiting her school in Winston-Salem. So I said sure, went, visited, liked the school, took the job. And shortly after I took the job, I was teaching kindergarten. And shortly after I took the job, our principal passed away. We had an interim principal, and then we had a new principal, who happens to now be our chief of staff, Dr. Ingrid Medlock. And so at that time, I was teaching, and then she promoted me to be her curriculum and testing coordinator. So I started working with all the teachers in the school, providing professional development, as well as the testing coordinator. And one day I walked into her office to give her a report and go over some data, and she said, do you want to get your doctorate? And I said, sure, why not? No questions asked, so she said, my mentor, has asked me to get my doctorate, and I'd love for you to get your doctorate with me. So then we started the journey of getting our doctorate together at Gardner-Webb. There were some life circumstances. She didn't finish at Gardner-Webb. She ended up going to Wingate to finish, but that's how I got on the path. I was not even thinking about getting my doctorate. She just made the suggestion, and I said, sure. Why not?
Do you want to know what? That is so Black woman, right? Because the first thing, what we're going to do is we're going to get a couple degrees. Right. Every single time. We might be poor one day, we're like, I'm going to get a degree. Right. I think I'm going to get, but I love that. That's one of the most educated groups of demographics in the United States, so it's always a good thing.
That's right.
And I'd love to know, during that time, had you already had your kids?
No. No. So when I went to Winston-Salem, that year that I mentioned that I was there for the first year, the principal passed away. Ingrid was my principal. I actually got married that year. So that was in 2002 when I started getting my doctorate. I did not have my first child. I finished my very last class working on my doctorate. I was 9 months pregnant. Mom had to drive me to Boiling Springs because we were terrified that I was going to have that baby some point between home and being at Gardner-Webb. She didn't come during that last class period. It was like 2 weeks later.
Okay, that was good. My next question was, okay, what happened? What happened? Okay.
Yes.
And then, so you get into becoming, you start as a first grade teacher at Guilford County Schools, right? Give me a little bit about your experience there, and then let's transition into what happens next. I want to get into how your role started to shift sooner than later.
Sure. So I did my student teaching at Hunter Elementary, and I did my student teaching in the fall. They didn't have any positions for me at Hunter Elementary, so I went to another school for half a year, and then Hunter hired me back to teach first grade. It was the most amazing school ever. High expectations, high energy. The majority of our students were on free and reduced lunch, so we were like 98 to 99% free and reduced lunch. So super high poverty. There was over 100 languages spoken just in the school, and the majority of our students were refugees. So we partnered with some Catholic organizations, that were housing students. So just a very, it was a very interesting dynamic, but extremely high expectations. And so we achieved high achievement every single year, year after year after year. And I just loved it. It was just the most amazing, incredible experience just to have everybody on go, and it was all for the students.
And then after that, you transitioned to some administration roles. What were some of those roles?
Mm-hmm. So a curriculum coordinator that I mentioned, that was my very first role outside of the classroom. And then I transitioned to an assistant principal role in Mooresville. And after being in Mooresville for a little while, I was actually looking for a principalship, and there was nothing open, and started applying actually here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. I was on my way to a job fair, and the superintendent called me and said, do not take a job in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. I'll have a position for you as a principal here in the district. And so I ended up being the principal, where I was actually the assistant principal, had a wonderful time at Parkview Elementary there, and then transitioned to an HR position, personnel director in Cabarrus County. I did that for a year and thought, I do not like being at the central office. I really want to be with students. Yeah. And I went back to Mooresville for a little bit. 1 year, actually 6 months being back at the school, and the superintendent came to me and said, I really want you to come to the central office. And I was like, I just left the central office. I don't want to be in the central office. I need to be with teachers and students and parents. And he said, I really need you in this role. And so I transitioned to an elementary director there and federal programs, did that for a while, and then transitioned back to Cabarrus County Schools when I was recruited to be the chief academic officer there.
And do you think there was a person, a time, or a moment that really helped you transition to that role? Because I know that in between, sometimes it takes a person or something, or sometimes circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. So what I would say, in every step of my career, there was a mentor who developed me and really poured into me. So at Hunter Elementary, it was my principal, Rob Gasparello. We still text back and forth. He's in the Elon area. I would say when I was at Latham, it was my current chief of staff, Dr. Ingrid Medlock. When I was in Mooresville, it was my superintendent, Dr. Mark Edwards, who was the National Superintendent of the Year. And then in my last role, it was my last superintendent, Dr. Chris Lauder. So great relationships with each of those individuals that just really poured into me, really believed in me, really pushed me to the next level. Really when I didn't believe that, I just want to be Crystal and just focus on what I'm doing right now. Stop pushing me. I just want to be the very best at what I can do right now. And they always push me to the next level.
You represent just around 1 to 1.5% of all Black female superintendents in the United States. I'd love for you to know, what do you think is behind not more coming to this role? Because when you look at the data on the school level, there are a lot of Black women who are in teaching roles or in administrative roles, but rarely they get up further. What have you seen in your experience that may have attributed to that not happening? And how you, as someone who is here, help pull others up?
Well, women in general, you know, if you look across the country, teaching is predominantly women. And then when you look at administration, you see a lot, it's not equal, right? You have all of these women who are in teaching roles, but then when you look at administrators, it's not like that. And then when you get to the superintendency, same thing. I'm one of a few in all of North Carolina. And then as you mentioned, Black females, it doesn't happen as well. You know, I really can't speak to the reason why it's, you know, why there's not more representation, but what I will say is that as a Black female, I've been blessed to have someone who recognized and nurtured the talent. And I think anyone who's in a leadership role, it's our responsibility to recognize and nurture talent. And what I will say about recognizing and nurturing talent, that it doesn't always feel good, right? So, you know, all of the people that I mentioned were not, oh, Crystal, you're the best thing in the world, you know, everything's great. And, you know, they pushed me, they challenged me when things weren't going as they should. You know, they sat me down, they were really honest with me, they were transparent, and helped me on a path forward. I can distinctly remember every one of those people that I named, really tough, candid situations that they had with me. And I think that that's what's necessary, and I think that that's what has given me the muscle to even be in the role that I'm in now. Because in any leadership position, you have to have tough skin. And so if you're not willing to have that tough skin and be able to deal with it, then, you know, when you advance into the superintendent role, you won't be able to handle the stress and the pressure. So extremely grateful for all that have poured into me. And again, I think it's my responsibility to pour into those that I work with, making sure that I'm recognizing and nurturing talent, especially from underrepresented groups of individuals.
And it's been more than a month now that you've been in this role. And so if you had to explain it in a few words, the journey, I know that's hard. How would you explain these first few weeks that you have?
Fast and furious. Those would be the two words. And you know, it's so interesting. I was blessed to have the opportunity to serve through the interim. You know the story, went through a rigorous process. And so I knew the transition from being interim to being the permanent superintendent would be a jump. I will say I've been surprised, I shouldn't say surprised. I didn't expect the jump to be as big as it was. And and you wouldn't think so, right? I stayed in my chief of staff office until I was named. But, you know, just from the outside looking in, people might think, well, nothing really changed. She was here as the interim, she just continued on. But it's just so different mentally, physically, emotionally, and then also the expectations that folks have on you. But I would definitely say fast, furious, but I am enjoying it and I'm having a ball.
That's good. I want to talk about your pillars. You have a 90-day plan to get folks out engagement, and it's academic, people engagement, and then operational and some engagement as well. So I want to talk about the academic side, right? That's one of the first ones, the first pillars. I remember I had that when we were talking about the test scores that had to come out from North Carolina, and some of the questions, like, you know, a lot of times when you want to present data, you talk about the things that you have done and that are well. And we kind of pushed you all kind of about, okay, but what about these other students? And I thought the answer that you gave was very much one of accountability, of here's where we are, but this is not where we want to be.
Right.
So to bring us back to that moment, CMS has a lot of disparities between its students, Black and Hispanic students, and its white and Asian students. It's reflected in the United States and North Carolina. But CMS's is just a little bit higher than the state average. And so I wonder, what does that look like for those students who are not seeing high achievement? It's a big question, and it has so many answers because you all spend hours at meetings talking
Right.
about it. But so the question is, how do you tackle that? What's the strategy? What do you do?
Right. Well, I believe that one of the strategies that we have to make sure that we're being diligent in is having a plan and executing that plan, right? So we should always be in a cycle of continuous improvement. We should always be planning, we should do, we should study, we should act. A lot of times in education, not just CMS, we do a lot of planning. We might get to the do part, but we certainly aren't studying and reflecting on what we've done. And so what we've done this year specifically, and it actually, I hate to say this year because it actually started last spring, is we've put in a very aggressive monitoring cadence, not just what you see at the board meetings at the dais, but what actually happens in this very room every single week. And so we're going through a very diligent process of making sure that we're transparent with the data, we're looking at it on a regular basis, we're implementing some things, we're reviewing to see the effectiveness, and then we're making changes as needed. So I think the public heard a little bit about that during my time as interim when we were giving the progress monitoring reports. The difference this year than last year is we're being much more aggressive. We started all of this work before the very first day of school, so we are much further along now than we ever could have been this time last year.
You all talk about, no, and you talk about transparency and accessibility for parents and students and stakeholders. I wonder, what's a moment that you've been proud of the transparency of the district and how you all have handled things? And what is something that you think, you may have slipped on, or just things happen. You're not perfect, and sometimes you may not always hit the ball rolling. So I wonder, are there two things where you had a proud moment of how you all are being different from how it has been in the past versus a moment where you think there was room for improvement when it came to transparency and how you handled something that was public?
Sure. I guess probably the best example would have been this last, the data press release. So when that data came, well, let me just say this. I, by nature, always go to the area that needs improvement, right? That's just my nature to go, like, this is all great, and I zero in on this little thing. So I have to be really intentional personally about focusing on where are our big wins, how do we celebrate successes, and then how do we build upon that success to address the needs. So I believe that this past year when we did our media briefing, it was extremely long, right? But I believe that we were extremely transparent because what we wanted to show is, yes, we have successes. We had improvements in reading and math across all groups of students. We wanted to show those arrows going up, but the area of transparency is where we showed those dot graphs, where we showed for every single content area where we were pre-pandemic all the way up till now, and showing how the gaps between our Black and Hispanic students and white and Asian students, it was big pre-pandemic and it continues to be big. And I believe that level of, even though we've talked about it, that level of transparency and the visual just lets everyone see this is a thing, it's an issue, we're going to tackle it, and we're not going to hide behind it. So I was really proud of that. And I'm also really proud about what we're saying that we're doing to address it and actually doing it and following through with it.
What is a moment that you felt that you all may not have been as transparent as your standards would have been, and how would you have improved it now that you've looked back?
Okay. All right. So I don't think this is really a matter of transparency, but I think it's definitely better communication. And so I would probably say it would be the whole South County realignment. And so obviously there was lots of communication that went out. We did tons of community engagement. Our team was out multiple nights, talking back and forth. We were really clear with putting everything on, on board docs, sharing that information over and over again. If we had to do it differently, though, I would say not necessarily transparency, maybe stretching out our timeline, doing a better job of forecasting when decisions were going to be made, and saying the same thing over and over and over again. So one of the things that we've realized that has been, and I say it all the time, is that you have to say the same thing 7 times in 7 different ways. And sometimes we may be communicating, but if we're not communicating in the way that the public understands it, then it doesn't matter, if that makes sense. So I don't think that that speaks to really transparency or trying to hide anything, but what can we do differently so the community understands what we're doing, and not only that they understand it, but they understand the why. And so I'm a big believer that we need to give people a runway of what's going to happen, so they can have a level of expectation. And so I think because there were so many new players, I was new in the role, the work was kind of all the way down. We had there was like lots of things that were new. In a perfect world, we would have been able to forecast and say this, and we did that, but I think we could have been clearer. This is when this is going to happen. This is when this is going to happen. This is what decision's going to be made. I think the other thing that we would do differently, that I plan to do differently as superintendent, because we know that there will be boundary changes in the future, that there will always be at least 2 choices for the board to choose from, if that makes sense. Instead of making one recommendation, then taking it back, then another recommendation and taking it back, and another recommendation, I think moving forward we might have 5 recommendations and then narrow it down to 2 or 3. So then there's an opportunity for a choice. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And each one of those options are all options that I can support. So the board isn't put in a position where they have to make a selection of one recommendation, but there's 3 very clear ones, and the community's had an opportunity to see all of those, and then when the vote comes, everybody's seen those 2 or 3 for an expanded amount of time. Does that make sense?
Kind of that piece, it was like 2 weeks, we changed this one thing, and now
yes.
we changed a lot of different things.
Yes.
So you'd want more opportunities that were vetted and had your eye on it. And
yes.
If you chose any of these 3,
right.
I'm behind either
right.
of them.
And I had my eye on it. I mean, I was right in there with it. I was vetting them. It was my recommendation. But moving forward, I can see how the community felt like, well, we had this, and then there was community engagement, and then it switched, and then it switched again. Whereas if we would have just had community engagement up front and had, in that scenario, 3 different recommendations and 3 recommendations that I supported, then the board could have made a decision on one of those 3 choices instead of just one. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
And then the community has time to sit with those choices instead of a change that happens over 3 weeks, 4 weeks, however much time there was. So I don't think our intention, we thought that we were being really transparent, but in hindsight, I can see how the community may have perceived that differently.
There is a big spotlight on education. There is a national election that's going to be coming up that's going to put an even bigger spotlight on education. People have different options. Opportunity scholarship have expanded. And so coming here to North Carolina, or being in North Carolina at a time where it's so pivotal for education and so many options, and sometimes you all are the enemy in some folks' minds. How do you get past that and keep folks focused and make sure that the children are first in all of this?
So one of the things that I've said, even in the interim role, is that I refuse to allow our students or our school district to be in a political football. Like, we're not going to get as much as possible in the middle of that. So obviously I have an understanding of the way that politics plays into K-12 education. We have an elected school board, we have elected legislators, we have an elected governor, we have an elected president that then who appoints
his cabinet.
Yes, his cabinet and his superintendent for the Department of Education. So I get all of that, but I will not allow our students or our staff to be pawns. So I think the best way to do that is keep the main thing the main thing. Schools were designed and developed to impact positively student achievement, plain and simple, right? Kids come to school to learn to read, they learn to write, and to graduate, like we're saying now, to be enlisted, enrolled, or employed. That is the purpose of school. And so one of my mentors long ago said, when the purpose of a thing is unknown, abuse is inevitable. And so I think that we have to remember what is the purpose of education and focus on that purpose. And then if you're focused on that purpose and you understand your why, then you're not distracted by all of the whirlwind that's happening around you. That's extremely difficult to do, but it's absolutely, definitely necessary. It's what I would want for my own children. And you've heard me say that 141,000 students, I want to reflect my children.
Okay, well, thank you so much
All
for your
right,
time, Dr. Hall.
thank you. I appreciate it.